This vehicle was reported stolen just this morning. Step away from the car.
You must have the wrong person. This is my car and I've done nothing wrong.
Rain glazed the pavement outside Dulles International, neon lights rippling over puddles. Dr. Amara Cole adjusted her passport case under her arm, her diplomatic badge flashing faintly beneath her coat as she stepped toward the curb. A black SUV rolled up, tinted windows, government plates. She'd landed straight from Geneva, exhausted but steady, until she saw the officer's eyes. "Ma'am," Officer Brent Halley called, voice flat. "Step aside." Random check. It wasn't random. The pause before "ma'am" said everything. The long stare, the hesitation at her skin. His hand hovered just a second too long near the holster. Amara kept her tone clipped. "I'm a U.S. envoy on record. You can scan my stop talking." His hand closed on her arm. Cameras flickered nearby, cell phones rising like witnesses. She heard the gasp before the pain. The metal cuffs snapped cold around her wrists. The crowd murmured. She didn't even resist. Her bag hit the wet ground, documents spilling the State Department seal, glinting briefly before disappearing under the officer's boot. He pressed her against the car, hard enough that her earring cut into her skin. Then came the line that sliced deeper than pressure. "People like you don't represent this country." Rain hammered. Flashlights flared. Her voice caught between fury and disbelief. "Check the ID," she said again, quieter this time, almost to herself. He didn't. A second squad car pulled up, doors slamming. Somewhere, a bystander shouted, "She's a diplomat." Halley's radio crackled. The sound froze him, one sharp name code he recognized, and his grip faltered. Her diplomatic ID was already in a puddle. The seal bleeding blue under the rain. The fluorescent lights inside Dulles International burned too bright for 2 a.m. Dr. Amara Cole kept her steps even, her luggage rolling in rhythm across the tiles. She'd landed from Geneva 6 hours late, carrying briefing notes for a human rights summit, and the fatigue of a 40-hour week compressed into one flight. The terminal was nearly empty. Janitors, a few late passengers, one uniformed officer leaning against a pillar, his thumb circling the strap of his holster like habit. "Evening, ma'am," he said as she passed. "Random customs screening." Amara paused. Her diplomatic ID hung visibly from her lanyard. "I've already cleared security," she replied, measured. "Diplomatic clearance code D47. You can verify." "Step aside," he repeated, sharper this time. "We can do this easy or we can do this difficult." She exhaled slowly. Years of training pressed behind her silence. "Of course." She placed her briefcase on the inspection table. The officer, Halley, his badge read, didn't check the tag. His eyes scanned her face instead. "You live here. I represent here." "That so?" His tone mocked disbelief. "And what country's letting you represent them?" "The United States." He blinked once, almost smirking. "You mean for the United States?" "No," she said, as the pause after that word filled the space like static. Another officer ambled over, curious. Halley's posture tightened, sensing an audience. "Let's see some ID that's not printed at home," he said. She handed him the passport, maroon cover, embossed seal. He flipped it open, squinting as though the text required translation. "Looks fancy," he muttered. "But we get a lot of forgeries." "It's verified by the State Department," she said, her controls still intact but thin as glass. "If you scan it," he reached for her arm before she finished. "Ma'am, I'm asking you to stay calm." "I am calm." Her voice carried clear, restrained. A traveler nearby stopped, recording quietly from behind a pillar. The click of the cuffs echoed against tile, metallic and final. Her bag slipped from her hand, scattering papers and one gleaming diplomatic credential across the floor. "Sir," she started, but his hand pushed her shoulder toward the wall. "Standard protocol," he said, as if rehearsed. "You're being detained for verification. You're violating international law." He hesitated for half a second. The other officer shifted uneasily. Halley ignored both. Funny how people always bring up laws when they're caught. Amara's jaw locked. "Do you realize who you're saving?" He pulled his radio. One female suspect, mid-30s, resisting verbal command. She turned her head enough to see her badge, the U.S. diplomatic seal, half-soaked under a fluorescent glare. Rain from the open terminal doors blew in faintly, carrying the smell of wet asphalt. Her heart pounded not from fear but from the cold disbelief of absurdity, the realization that status meant nothing when bias wore a badge. The crowd grew. Someone whispered, "She didn't do anything." Another voice, "She's a diplomat." Halley froze only when the supervisor arrived. a gray-haired lieutenant whose frown cut through the noise. He leaned in, studying the passport that still lay on the ground. Hallie, the man said quietly, release her now. What? She's cleared. Check your database. Hallie's face drained color. He unlocked the cuffs, his hand trembling once. Protocol doesn't cover stupidity, the lieutenant snapped. Amara rubbed her wrists, red and raw. Her voice was low, contained. You'll hear from my office. Hallie didn't respond. Cameras still glinted from the crowd. The lieutenant's command tone softened, but his eyes didn't meet hers. Ma'am, we regret, don't. She straightened, lifted her briefcase, and looked once more at the officer who'd arrested her. His expression hovered between defiance and dawning fear. Then, she walked past them, head high, through the automatic doors into the rain. Outside, the cameras followed. Her silence hit harder than anything she could have said. The room was painted in a color that didn't exist in nature. Gray, mixed with fatigue. No clocks, no windows, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint buzz of an unseen vent. Dr. Amara Cole sat in the metal chair, wrists red where the cuffs had been. A styrofoam cup of untouched water rested on the table. Across from her, Officer Hallie filled out forms he didn't understand, his pen tapping in irritation. The humiliation had slowed time. Each minute stretched until her composure felt like armor about to crack. Name? He asked, without looking up. You already have it. Spell it. Her voice stayed even. Ayemi. Aya. Cool. He wrote it down like a challenge, the scratch of pen sharp in the silence. What's your occupation? Diplomat, U.S. Special Envoy to the Human Rights Council. He snorted softly. That a real title or something you made up for? The door opened. Lieutenant Briggs entered, holding a tablet. His tone cut the air. Hallie, step outside. Hallie froze, halfway through another question. Sir, I'm verifying now. The door shut behind him. Briggs placed the tablet on the table, turning it toward her. Dr. Cole, your credentials have been confirmed through the State Department. The system delay was unfortunate. Her voice was quiet but You had my clearance code before he even touched me. He exhaled. Yes, but the officer acted under perceived threat. What threat? Briggs hesitated, then defaulted to bureaucracy. We'll conduct an internal review. Amara leaned forward, hands folded, eyes steady. No apology. He said nothing. The silence itself was the answer. She stood, retrieving her coat from the back of the chair. I'll need documentation of this detainment. That's not necessary. It is. She met his gaze. And lawful. Briggs looked down at his tablet again, pressing a few keys. A report will be filed. She gave a short, bitter laugh. Filed, not released. When she left the room, Hallie was standing in the hallway, pretending to read a note. He avoided her eyes, jaw clenched, hands in fists. Double quotes. Dr. Cole, he said finally, voice brittle. Misunderstanding, nothing personal. She stopped, turned slowly toward him. You put your hands on a diplomat because of how she looked. That is personal. He didn't reply. Her phone buzzed. International code. She stepped away before answering. Amara, came the voice, crisp and accented, her Geneva liaison. We've seen the footage already. It's circulating on multiple platforms. You should prepare a statement. She paused near the exit. The thought of her name trending beside the word arrested made her stomach knot. Not yet, she said. Let it burn itself out. It won't, the liaison said. It's too visual. To clip. Outside the precinct, cameras flashed again. Someone shouted her name. Microphones angled forward. She shielded her face with her hand. No comments. The ride home was silent. Her driver, an embassy aide, watched the road, jaw tight. They'll try to bury it, he murmured. I know. Do you want me to call the press office? No. She looked out the window, the blur of streetlights smearing gold across the glass. If I speak now, I'll sound angry, and that's all they'll see. He nodded, understanding too well that at home. She removed the blazer that still smelled faintly of rain and adrenaline. Her wrists ached. The mirror caught the small bruise where the cuff had dug too deep. She touched it once, then turned away. Her phone buzzed again, this time a text. Unknown number. Sorry, didn't mean for it to go that far. No name, but she didn't need one. She deleted it without replying. Then she opened her laptop, typed a single note to herself. Record everything. A resolve formed, clean, deliberate. The diplomat's restraint gave way to the strategist's focus. By morning, her inbox filled with press requests and confidential inquiries. The footage had gone global overnight, clipped, shared, and dissected. and the department still hadn't issued an apology. At 7:45 a.m., her assistant entered with 2 cups of coffee and a printout. "They're saying it was a mix-up, ma'am." "Wrong ID." Amara scanned the statement. Each word was calibrated to erase accountability, regret, procedure, verification process. She circled a line with her pen. "Officer Halley acted in accordance with standard screening protocol." Her assistant grimaced. "That's not true." "I know." She folded the paper once and set it aside. There was a long pause. The assistant hesitated. "Will you respond?" Amara looked toward the window, the morning sun catching the skyline. "Not yet." The restraint cost her. Every instinct demanded confrontation, exposure, justice. But she'd spent her life learning that timing could be sharper than rage. Still, in the quiet of her apartment, the echo of that line returned. "People like you don't represent this country." She whispered the words once, tasting their venom, then forced them out of her mind. For now, she would wait. But the world had already moved without her. The video, 39 seconds long, was climbing millions of views by the hour, and somewhere, Officer Halley was scrolling through his phone, watching himself become a symbol. He didn't understand. The story had begun its own trial. It began on a commuter's phone, a shaky, 30-9-second video uploaded without context. Within an hour, it was reposted on 6 platforms, tagged under #airportarrest, #diplomat detained, and #peoplelikeYou. By morning, it had 1 million views. The footage opened with rain streaking across the terminal glass. Then, a voice. She didn't even do anything. The camera caught Officer Halley's hand, gripping Amara Cole's arm. The brief flash of the State Department's seal. His line caught perfectly over the echo of sirens. "People like you don't represent this country." Cut to black. No introduction, no aftermath. Just humiliation crystallized into viral spectacle. In her office at the embassy. Amara watched it once, only once, before closing her laptop. Her staff hovered nearby, faces drawn tight. "They're asking for a statement." Her communications aide said. "CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, everyone." "I said no press yet." "With respect, ma'am." "The silence makes them louder." Amara turned, her tone flat. "I'm not defending my humanity on a news cycle." The aide swallowed, nodded, retreated. Across town, Officer Halley sat in his patrol car, scrolling through the same video on repeat. The comments bled anger, threats, insults, racial slurs, reversed back at him. His face froze mid-motion, immortalized as an emblem of arrogance. "Turn that off," his partner muttered. "You're making it worse." "They edited it," Halley snapped. "They don't show what happened before." "What did happen before?" He didn't answer. By noon, the department's official statement was out. It read like a form letter. "The Metropolitan Police Department is aware of a recent incident at Dulles Airport. All procedures followed were within lawful parameters, pending full review." Online, the response was instant and feral. Hashtags multiplied. Commentators picked apart body language, audio tone, even the tilt of Halley's wrist. Memes appeared. Editorials followed. Amara's phone didn't stop buzzing. Colleagues from Geneva, Nairobi, Ottawa, all asking if she was all right, if it was real, if she planned to sue. She kept replying with the same line, "I'm fine, focus on the work." But that night, watching her reflection in the apartment window, she didn't look fine. The bruise had darkened along her wrist. The silence she'd chosen now felt less like control, more like confinement. Her doorbell rang. It was her friend and legal advisor, Deshaun Rivers. Sharp suit, steady voice. "You've seen the numbers?" he asked, setting his coat down. "It's bigger than an incident. It's a movement." "I didn't ask for that." "Movements don't ask for permission." She poured tea, hands still trembling slightly. "If I speak, they'll turn me into an archetype. Angry black woman, emotional diplomat, racial martyr, pick one." He leaned against the counter. "Or they'll see a professional forced to confront a broken system." She met his eyes. "And what happens after that?" "They'll chew it up for a week. #justice, then forget." He sighed. "You underestimate how long people remember humiliation when it's public." She didn't respond. Across the city, news anchors debated tone over truth. One asked if she had overreacted. Another speculated about procedural confusion. The word racism floated but rarely landed. By midnight, her name was trending globally. At the precinct, Halley's supervisor entered his office with a folder. "You're off rotation until further notice." "What? You can't just—" "It's for your safety," the man said. And for hours Halley stood, pacing. They're destroying me online. I followed the book, then the book's wrong, the supervisor said quietly, and the cameras caught it. The next morning, Amara woke to find her face on the front page of the Washington Post. Diplomat detained, racial bias or routine procedure. She didn't read the full article. She didn't have to. The headline had already done its work, splitting truth into marketable debate. Her assistant entered, tablet in hand. The State Department wants to issue a joint statement, distancing from the incident. Distancing, Amara repeated. Cold, not supporting. It's politics, the assistant said. They don't want to escalate tensions. She stared at the window again, a city that called itself civilized while perfecting denial. Prepare my notes, she said finally. If they want diplomacy, I'll give them diplomacy. Deshawn frowned. You're going to the press. Not yet. She gathered her files. First, I'll speak where words are supposed to matter. Where's that? The State Department. As she left the apartment, cameras waited at the curb, questions flying like darts. Dr. Cole, was it racism? Do you plan to sue? Do you forgive the officer? She didn't slow. Her silence wasn't surrender. It was ammunition. By evening, networks broadcast split screens. Hallie under investigation. Amara entering government buildings. 2 lives caught in the machinery of public reckoning. The video played again, endlessly looping, every click a reminder that humiliation now had an audience. And somewhere, deep in the feed, a new clip surfaced, bodycam footage the public hadn't seen yet. A different angle, clearer sound. The internet noticed before anyone else did. The press room at the State Department was full before Amara arrived. Rows of cameras, the low murmur of reporters, the hum of power trying to disguise curiosity. She walked in without entourage, face composed, hands steady, though her pulse betrayed her. The microphone gleamed beneath the lights like a weapon disguised as neutrality. Dr. Cole, someone called. Are you filing charges against Officer Hallie? No. Her voice was clear, deliberate. Not yet. Flashes went off. Can you confirm the video's authenticity? I can confirm the video shows exactly what it looks like. A law enforcement officer detaining a U.S. diplomat without cause. A murmur rippled through the crowd. She continued, each word surgically measured. This incident is not about me. It's about a system that teaches suspicion before respect, and defends that suspicion when it's exposed. A pause. That's all. She turned from the podium before the next question could rise. Cameras caught her profile, composed, resolute, and the image hit social media within minutes. Branded #composed resistance. Inside the department, the reaction was colder. Assistant Secretary Rowe closed the door behind her as Amara entered his office. You blindsided us. I told the truth. You ignited an international spectacle. She sat across from him. The spectacle existed before I said anything. Rowe rubbed his temples. The secretary wants this contained. The embassy in Geneva is already fielding inquiries. You're making the administration look accountable, she interrupted. He gave her a hard look. Uncooperative. The silence stretched. Amara leaned forward. Sir, my detainment was unlawful. My identity was verified and ignored. That's not a misunderstanding. It's misconduct. He exhaled. You've made your point. I haven't even begun. Rowe's tone sharpened. Watch your tone, Dr. Cole. Her eyes didn't waver. Watch the institution that allowed it. Outside the office, her phone buzzed nonstop. Journalists, diplomats, strangers. One message stood out. A private number. Text only. You should stop before this ruins your career. No signature. She locked the screen, jaw tight. That night, on the local news, Hallie's union representative appeared for an interview. This is a witch hunt, he said. Officer Hallie followed standard procedure. He had no way to confirm her claims in real time. This narrative of racism is media manipulation. The interviewer nodded blandly. So you deny bias played a role? Absolutely. In fact, new information suggests Dr. Cole may have been argumentative. The lie landed like a grenade. By morning, anonymous sources within the department leaked that she'd been uncooperative, defensive, agitated. Online, the tone shifted. Commentators began dissecting her body language, her attitude, her tone. The subtle recalibration from victim to aggressor had begun. At breakfast, her assistant slid a tablet toward her. They're smearing you, ma'am. She read the headline aloud. Diplomat's outburst raises questions about professional conduct. A thin smile. Textbook inversion. Deshawn called within minutes. You need to respond publicly. Silence isn't strategy anymore. It's ammunition for them. She sipped her coffee. If I fight every lie, I validate the liar. And if you don't, they rewrite the story while you watch. She didn't answer. The weight of exhaustion pressed between her ribs. Hours later, she sat before her embassy's media advisor, a woman named Rena, with a voice like tempered glass. You can't win by staying quiet, Rena said. They're flooding the space with their version. You need to reclaim narrative authority. Amara's fingers traced the rim of her cup. How? Speak, but not emotionally, strategically. Turn this into an institutional conversation, not a personal one. Make it about the system, not you. Amara nodded slowly. I'll need a platform. I'll get you one. That evening, she walked past a protest forming outside the precinct. Signs raised, chants rhythmic and fierce. Justice for Amara. End racial profiling. Diplomacy deserves respect. She stopped for a moment, unseen, among the crowd. Their anger vibrated through the air, raw and electric. A young woman noticed her and froze. It's you, she whispered. You're her. Amara gave a small nod. The woman's eyes filled. We're with you. Amara's throat tightened. Be with the truth, she said quietly. Not me. She moved on before anyone else noticed. Later, back home, she opened her laptop and began drafting a speech, not for the media, but for the International Human Rights Forum she'd been scheduled to address in Geneva next week. The title she typed, Accountability, the Silent Diplomacy of Prejudice. The cursor blinked after the first sentence she wrote. Power without reflection becomes permission. Half a city away, Hallie watched the protest footage on TV, bitterness carved into his face. His wife hovered near the door. You need to apologize, she said softly. For what? Doing my job. Her voice trembled. You know that's not what this is. He turned away. They don't know me. They just need a villain. She hesitated. Maybe they don't, but you gave them one. He didn't answer. By midnight, a new memo circulated within the department, confidential. Unsigned. Dr. Cole's conduct under review for potential diplomatic misconduct. Recommend suspension pending inquiry. The institution had decided, if they couldn't silence her, they would isolate her. The air in the embassy press hall was electric. Microphones lined the table, camera lenses glinting like watchful eyes. The official seal behind the podium looked ceremonial. But today it was a battlefield emblem. Dr. Amara Cole adjusted her jacket, the faint bruise still visible beneath her cuff. Deshawn stood beside her, murmuring final notes. You're sure about this? He asked. Yes, she said. They built their version of the story. It's time I build mine. The moment she stepped up, the room hushed. I wasn't going to speak, she began, voice calm, measured. I thought silence might protect my dignity, but silence only protects the system that thrives on it. The first flash popped. She didn't blink. What happened to me was not a misunderstanding. It was a choice, the product of training that teaches fear over judgment, suspicion over reason. Every line cut with precision. I am not here to destroy anyone's career. I am here because the law and the truth are supposed to apply equally. What happened to me is what happens to too many people who cannot call a press conference afterward. Reporters leaned forward. The weight of her tone pulled the room taut. When a black woman with diplomatic credentials can be handcuffed before being verified. The issue isn't identification, it's identity itself. A low murmur rippled through the hall, the realization that she wasn't defending herself, she was indicting the structure. I have served this nation on 3 continents, she continued, but on that night, to one officer, I was not a diplomat. I was only a color that needed control. Her voice stayed steady, but her hands trembled once, only once, before she gripped the podium again. I will cooperate with all investigations, but I will not cooperate with silence. The final line landed like thunder. She stepped away as questions erupted. Deshawn blocked the barrage of microphones. No statements beyond the address, he said, guiding her toward the exit. By the time she reached her car, the clip had already hit the airwaves. Within an hour, networks replayed her words on loop. Headlines shifted tone. Diplomat breaks silence, calls out institutional racism. Powerful address exposes police bias. Social media lit up. Hashtags that had once mocked her now turned militant. Hashtag verify before you vilify. Hashtag Amara speaks. Hashtag systemic eyes. Across the city, Officer Hallie watched the broadcast from his kitchen table, face pale, hands clenched. His phone buzzed nonstop. Reporters, lawyers, anonymous messages, death threats. His wife hovered behind him, silent, She's killing my reputation, he muttered. She's telling the truth, his wife said softly. He looked at her sharply. Whose side are you on? The one that didn't handcuff an innocent woman. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. Hours later, the mayor's office released a statement announcing an independent investigation into the arrest, civilian oversight. Full transparency. The words sounded noble. The timing was political. Meanwhile, Amara sat in her apartment, watching the world dissect her again. The praise, the outrage, the analysis, all detached from her actual exhaustion. Deshaun called. You did it, he said. You changed the narrative. Did I? She replied. Or did I just feed it something new to chew on? He sighed. You exposed the system. That matters. It matters today, she said. Tomorrow they'll find another story. But she knew this one wasn't fading quietly. That evening, the New York Times ran a front-page feature. Diplomat's arrest sparks national debate on policing and racial bias. The article quoted her entire speech. It also mentioned Hallie's disciplinary hearing, quietly moved up, unannounced. The next day, she received an envelope marked Confidential Internal Affairs. The letter inside read, Dr. Cole, we are commencing formal review of the incident involving Officer Hallie. We request your cooperation in testimony under Section 4B, Department of Internal Oversight. She placed the letter on her desk, beside a second document, one she'd drafted herself. Formal complaint, violation of Vienna Convention and Civil Rights, Statute 18 U.S.C. Section 242. Deshaun's voice echoed in her head from days earlier. Movements don't ask permission. She signed her name at the bottom. Later that week, she was summoned to the oversight office. Sterile walls, flag in the corner, 3 officials seated behind a long table. Dr. Cole, the lead investigator, said, we'd like your account of the events at Dulles. She described it clinically, without embellishment, each word measured like testimony in a tribunal. When she finished, one of the officials cleared his throat. Officer Hallie insists you were uncooperative. He claims you refused to show identification. Amara's jaw tightened. He had it in his hand. It was visible. The cameras confirmed that. Another official scribbled notes. Do you believe his actions were racially motivated? She looked him straight in the eye. I believe his assumptions were. Silence followed, sharp, uncomfortable, revealing. Afterward, she stepped out into the hallway, body tense, mind still burning with composure she couldn't afford to lose. A young clerk stopped her quietly. Dr. Cole, yes, I just wanted to say, I watched that video. My mother watched it too. Thank you for saying what no one in this building ever says out loud. Amara nodded once. Thank you for listening. Back outside, flashes met her again. Reporters, stationed by the entrance. Dr. Cole, any comment on today's hearing? She paused, then answered with a single line that would headline every major outlet by nightfall. I'm not on trial. The system is. By the next morning, the city buzzed with fallout. Police brass scrambled to contain damage. Civil rights lawyers rallied. Hallie's union distanced itself. And in Washington's power corridors, her name became shorthand for exposure. The diplomat who spoke too plainly, too publicly, too truthfully. But Amara didn't care about politics anymore. Her next flight was already booked. Geneva. The work would continue. The hearing was only the beginning. Still, as she packed her notes, she hesitated. The bruise had faded, but the memory hadn't. Justice, she realized, was never a clean victory. It was negotiation through wounds. Across the city, Officer Hallie watched the broadcast from his kitchen table, face pale, hands clenched. His phone buzzed nonstop. Reporters, lawyers, anonymous messages, death threats. His wife hovered behind him, silent. She's killing my reputation, he muttered. She's telling the truth, his wife said softly. He looked at her sharply. Whose side are you on? The one that didn't handcuff an innocent woman. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. Hours later, the mayor's office released a statement announcing an independent investigation into the arrest, civilian oversight, full transparency. The words sounded noble. The timing was political. Meanwhile, Amara sat in her apartment, watching the world dissect her again. The praise, the outrage, the analysis, all detached from her actual exhaustion. Deshaun called. You did it, he said. You changed the narrative. Did I? She replied. Or did I just feed it something new to chew on? He sighed. You exposed the system. That matters. It matters today, she said. Tomorrow they'll find another story. But she knew this one wasn't fading quietly. That evening, the New York Times ran a front-page feature. Diplomat's arrest sparks national debate on policing and racial bias. The article quoted her entire speech. It also mentioned Hallie's disciplinary hearing, quietly moved up, unannounced. The next day, she received an envelope marked Confidential Internal Affairs. The letter inside read, Dr. Cole, we are commencing formal review of the incident involving Officer Hallie. We request your cooperation in testimony under Section 4B, Department of Internal Oversight. She placed the letter on her desk, beside a second document, one she'd drafted herself. Formal complaint, violation of Vienna Convention and Civil Rights Statute 18, USC Section 242. Deshawn's voice echoed in her head from days earlier. Movements don't ask permission. She signed her name at the bottom. Later that week, she was summoned to the oversight office. Sterile walls, flag in the corner, 3 officials seated behind a long table. Dr. Cole, the lead investigator, said, we'd like your account of the events at Dulles. She described it clinically, without embellishment. Each word measured like testimony in a tribunal. When she finished, one of the officials cleared his throat. Officer Hallie insists you were uncooperative. He claims you refused to show identification. Amara's jaw tightened. He had it in his hand. It was visible. The cameras confirmed that. Another official scribbled notes. Do you believe his actions were racially motivated? She looked him straight in the eye. I believe his assumptions were. Silence followed, sharp, uncomfortable, revealing. Afterward, she stepped out into the hallway, body tense, mind still burning with composure she couldn't afford to lose. A young clerk stopped her quietly. Dr. Cole, yes, I just wanted to say, I watched that video. My mother watched it too. Thank you for saying what no one in this building ever says out loud. Amara nodded once. Thank you for listening. Back outside, flashes met her again. Reporters stationed by the entrance. Dr. Cole, any comment on today's hearing? She paused, then answered with a single line that would headline every major outlet by nightfall. I'm not on trial. The system is. By the next morning, the city buzzed with fallout. Police brass scrambled to contain damage. Civil rights lawyers rallied. Hallie's union distanced itself, and in Washington's power corridors, her name became shorthand for exposure, the diplomat who spoke too plainly, too publicly, too truthfully. But Amara didn't care about politics anymore. Her next flight was already booked to Neva. The work would continue. The hearing was only the beginning. Still, as she packed her notes, she hesitated. The bruise had faded, but the memory hadn't. Justice, she realized, was never a clean victory. It was negotiation through wounds. At home, Amara sat watching the news with muted television glow painting her face. The anchor's words faded in her ears. She was exhausted, not triumphant. Deshawn entered with a folder. You should see this. What now? International coverage. BBC, Al Jazeera. Even the EU's Human Rights Council is calling for a review of U.S. police interactions with diplomats of color. She exhaled. I didn't want to be a case study. You became a mirror, he said quietly. Now they have to look. A knock interrupted them. It was a young woman from the embassy, nervous, holding a sealed document. Dr. Cole, she said, this came through diplomatic channels, from Geneva. Amara opened it. Official memorandum, United Nations Human Rights, Subcommittee on Equality, special session invitation. They wanted her to testify. Her hands trembled slightly. So now I'm evidence, she murmured. Deshawn said, no, you're precedent. That night, in his apartment, Hallie watched the same broadcast, her calm face, the newscaster's solemn tone, the footage looping endlessly. His phone vibrated. Mandatory appearance before the police standards. Board 0900 tomorrow. He threw the phone across the room, his reflection in the dark. TV screen looked hollow. Morning. The department announced his suspension pending termination review. His union issued a statement, calling it unfair political pressure. But inside the board chambers, fairness had nothing to do with politics. It had to do with exposure. When the verdict came, it was short and devastating. Officer Hallie is hereby dismissed from service, effective immediately, for conduct unbecoming and violation of civil rights procedure. He sat still as the words landed. One career ended in the same silence where another's dignity had been stripped out. Outside, reporters swarmed. He covered his face, pushing through. Camas caught him anyway, the man who became a symbol of what was no longer defensible. Meanwhile, Amara prepared for her UN testimony. Her speech notes were simple, no rhetoric, no dramatics, just facts and reflection. Justice, she wrote, isn't measured by who loses their job, but by who finally gets to speak without being silenced. Before her flight, she stopped by the river near her apartment, the same water she'd stared at weeks ago, when she felt voiceless. This time, the city noise around her didn't sound hostile, just distant. She whispered, let this mean something. In the distance, church bells chimed, solemn, echoing across the water. She turned away, walking toward the car, waiting to take her to the airport. Justice wasn't finished. But for once, it had started. The chamber of the United Nations Human Rights Subcommittee was vast, sterile, and cold. The kind of room where justice was supposed to feel official, but often felt abstract. Rows of diplomats and observers sat in quiet rows, the translation headsets glinting like instruments of distance. Dr. Amara Cole stood at the podium, her notes arranged in neat precision. Cameras flashed softly, respectful, but relentless. She wasn't nervous anymore. Nerves were for people asking for permission. She was here to confirm reality. Madame Chair, she began, her voice steady. Thank you for allowing me to speak. What I will describe is not unique. It is systemic. What happened to me is part of an architecture, one built to protect power and explain away harm. The delegates leaned in. Her tone wasn't emotional, it was surgical. I was detained on U.S. soil despite diplomatic immunity. My identification was visible. My name was verified within minutes of my arrest. Yet in those minutes, I was not treated as a citizen, nor as an official representative of my government. I was treated as a threat. She paused. The officer who detained me has been dismissed, but dismissal doesn't dismantle the conditions that produced him. Her words echoed through the translation booths. Institutional bias is not an act, it's a habit, a learned reflex. It cannot be reformed by apology. It must be restructured by accountability. The room stayed silent. Even silence, she thought, could sometimes mean recognition. A delegate from South Africa spoke through his microphone. Dr. Cole, in your view, what ensures accountability? She met his gaze. Visibility, she said. Make them know we are watching. Applause rippled, small at first, then building. The chair banged her gavel gently. Order, please. But even she smiled faintly. The broadcast spread globally. Networks clipped her lines into sound. Institutional bias is a habit, not an accident. Dismissal doesn't dismantle. Within hours, think pieces flooded the internet. Civil rights organizations released statements demanding review of law enforcement practices involving diplomats and minorities. The Department of State faced pressure from foreign embassies demanding guarantees. For the first time in years, the words racial bias appeared in congressional subcommittee memos without being softened into euphemism. Meanwhile, back in the United States, Hallie watched her speech from his couch. He hadn't shaved in days. The screen reflected off his eyes like judgment. He reached for the remote, then stopped. Her voice filled the small, silent room. Until accountability outlives the news cycle, no justice will be permanent. He turned off the television and sat in darkness. For the first time, the anger drained out, replaced by something colder, heavier. Recognition. Across the ocean, Amara finished her address and stepped away from the podium. A dozen journalists approached her in the corridor. Dr. Cole, do you feel vindicated? She stopped. Vindication isn't justice, she said. Justice is when no one else has to go through what I did. Her security ushered her away before the next question. Later that night, she sat in her Geneva hotel room, curtains open to the faint glow of city lights. The phone buzzed. Deshawn on the line. You went global, he said. I didn't want fame, she replied. I wanted consequence. You got both, he said softly. They've opened a joint investigation between state and justice. That's never happened before. She looked out the window. Then it's beginning. He paused. How are you holding up? She smiled faintly, though he couldn't see it. Tired, but still standing. Outside, rain began to fall light, steady, rhythmic. Meanwhile, in Washington, the mayor's office held a press conference. Our administration reaffirms its commitment to reform, the mayor said. Dr. Cole's experience has exposed failures we must confront. Effective immediately, new verification and bias training protocols will be implemented for all law enforcement officers. The statement sounded polished bureaucratic sincerity, but beneath it, something had shifted. No one wanted to be the next department trending under #Diplomat detained. Days later, a letter arrived at Amara's embassy suite. She opened it cautiously. From Department of State, Bureau of Diplomatic Security. Subject, formal apology, and reaffirmation of status. On behalf of the United States government, we extend a formal apology for the treatment you endured. Your service record and diplomatic standing remain in highest regard. We commit to ensuring that no accredited diplomat will face similar circumstances. She read the letter twice. It felt too neat, like closure written by a committee. Still, she folded it carefully and set it aside. Her eyes drifted toward her reflection in the mirror. The same face, the same calm, but something in the eyes had changed. She no longer looked uncertain. She looked unafraid at dawn. She took a walk along Lake Geneva. The water was silver, quiet, almost forgiving. She breathed in the cold air. She thought about that night, the asphalt, the cuffs, the flashing red and blue, about how fear had turned into defiance, about how defiance had turned into testimony. Her phone vibrated again, a text from Deshawn. He resigned. She didn't need to ask who. She just stared at the message. Then she typed back one word, good. Across the Atlantic, Officer Halley submitted his resignation letter to the State Police Board. His final line read, I acted without judgment. I regret the harm caused. It wasn't redemption, but it was acknowledgement. The story didn't end with applause. It ended with aftermath. Amara knew that movements weren't finished when the world stopped watching. They continued in silence, in policies, in small corrections, in changed eyes. She stopped at the lake's edge. The sun broke through the clouds, scattering light over the surface. Let them keep watching, she whispered. Then she turned back toward the embassy. Her next meeting was with the Global Task Force on Equity in Policing. Justice had begun its long, slow work. The federal hearing room was designed to look impartial. Neutral carpet, pale lighting, the faint hum of air conditioning masking unease. But Amara knew neutrality was a performance. Every inch of this place served power, not balance. Today, it would serve exposure. Rows of press and observers filled the gallery. At the front, the Oversight Committee sat behind an oak dais, the emblem of justice carved above their heads like irony cast in wood. Officer Halley sat to the right, flanked by his lawyer. His eyes stayed fixed on the table. Amara entered with quiet grace, wearing the same navy suit from her first hearing. Deliberate symmetry. She took her seat. The air tightened. The chairwoman spoke. We convene this hearing under Section 6C to determine liability and systemic accountability regarding the unlawful detention of Dr. Amara Cole, accredited diplomat of the Republic of Liberia. A murmur ran through the audience. The official phrasing was blunt. The chair turned to her. Dr. Cole, thank you for your cooperation. You may begin with your opening statement. Amara stood, her voice calm, stripped of performance. Madam Chair, I appreciate the opportunity. I want to make clear, this is not about one officer. It's about a system that made his actions predictable. Halley's attorney shifted uncomfortably. She continued. Bias does not arrive wearing a hood. It wears a badge, a policy, a training manual that never questions its own reflection. The gallery murmured again. I was detained because the presumption of guilt attached itself to my skin faster than the truth could reach my name. The question isn't how this happened to me, it's why it keeps happening to others. When she sat down, silence hung heavy. The chair nodded once. Thank you, Dr. Cole. Officer Halley, your statement. Halley rose stiffly, clutching a sheet of paper. His voice shook slightly. I regret what happened, he began. I believed I was following procedure. I didn't know who she was. I was trying to do my job. Your job, Amara said quietly, was to listen when you were told the truth. The chair rapped her gavel lightly. Please direct statements through the committee. Halley swallowed. I didn't mean harm. He stopped, the words dying midair. I was wrong. The lawyer beside him stiffened. That wasn't in the script. The chair leaned forward. You admit wrongdoing. Yes, he said, voice barely audible. I treated her like a suspect because that's what I've been trained to see. The words echoed through the room, stunning even his own counsel. Amara studied him, not vindictive, not forgiving, just present. The chair nodded slowly. Your honesty is noted, but acknowledgement alone doesn't resolve harm. She turned to the panel. The committee has reviewed the full record, the footage, testimony, procedural reports, and the department's training directives. We find consistent evidence of racial bias embedded within enforcement structures. The decision that followed wasn't swift. It was deliberate, surgical, damning. Officer Halley's conduct violated both federal civil rights statutes and international diplomatic protocol. The Department of Justice will proceed with formal review. The Metropolitan Police Department is hereby ordered to implement comprehensive anti-bias reform under federal supervision. The hall erupted flashes, whispers, applause muffled by decorum. Amara remained still. Her pulse didn't quicken. She'd learned that justice didn't feel like triumph. It felt like breath after near suffocation. After adjournment, reporters swarmed. Dr. Cole, do you believe this ruling changes anything? She faced the cameras. Change isn't a ruling, she said. It's a reckoning, and reckoning is never comfortable. She walked past them, exiting into the corridor. Deshawn waited by the elevator, pride mixed with fatigue. You did it, he said softly. No, she replied. We did it. Every person who filmed, who refused to look away, they did it. They rode down in silence. Outside the city buzzed a swarm of journalists, protesters, and citizens holding signs. Justice has no immunity. Accountability is policy. The air smelled of rain again, same as that night weeks ago. Later, Amara sat alone in her apartment, shoes off, TV muted. The scrolling ticker read, Historic federal oversight order issued after Diplomat's wrongful arrest. Her reflection flickered in the darkened window. She whispered, history is just the name they give to what survivors leave behind. A knock sounded. She opened the door. It was Halley. He stood there in plain clothes, a sealed envelope in hand. She didn't invite him in. He extended the envelope. My letter to the committee, and to you. I wanted to give it personally. She hesitated, then took it. Why? I thought I understood the world, he said quietly. I was wrong. You didn't deserve any of it. Amara looked at him, this man who had once reduced her to a color. I didn't need your apology, she said. I needed your awareness. Keep it. She handed the envelope back. Halley looked down. Then I'll earn it. She stepped back. Do that somewhere far from another badge. He nodded once, eyes hollow, and left. When the door closed, Amara exhaled, not relief, not anger, just release. The next morning, her story appeared in every major paper, not as a scandal, but as precedent. Universities taught it under modern diplomacy and racial systems, and somewhere, buried in the legal archives, Cole v. Department of Justice became a reference, one that forced change, word by word, policy by policy. She didn't watch the coverage. She was already working on her next project, an initiative titled Protocol of Respect. Its goal, mandatory cross-cultural training for all international law enforcement units. The system that broke her was now funding her reform. Justice, imperfect but real, had come full circle. Months had passed. The city had moved on, at least. It pretended to. The news cycle had devoured new scandals, new faces. But for Dr. Amara Cole, silence wasn't an ending. It was aftermath. That the reforms she'd helped push through were real, signed, funded, monitored. Officers now carried new training manuals, stamped with her name on the opening citation. Cole Protocol, verification, de-escalation, and bias prevention. Irony had never felt so exact. She arrived at the Metropolitan Police Headquarters one humid morning, not as a victim, not as a witness, but as a consultant. Her presence filled the lobby with uneasy gravity. A young cadet greeted her nervously. Dr. Cole, right this way. The commissioner's expecting you. Inside, Commissioner Avery stood by the window, hands clasped. Dr. Cole, he said, we're honored. Honor isn't the point, she said. Compliance is, he smiled faintly. Understood. As she walked through the training facility, she passed rows of recruits watching a projected video, her own recorded testimony. The irony struck her again. A moment once meant to break her was now mandatory education. One instructor paused the video. Notice what went wrong, he said. Notice how assumption shaped action. Amara observed quietly. The recruits listened, some taking notes, others visibly uncomfortable. That discomfort was necessary. Later, she stood at the podium before them. I'm not here to lecture, she said. I'm here to remind you what power looks like when it forgets its purpose. A young officer raised his hand. Ma'am, do you believe we can change a system built like this? She looked at him, young, uncertain, uncorrupted by certainty. Yes, she said, but not by pretending you're the hero. Change starts when you stop needing to be. The room fell silent. After the session, she stepped outside, breathing in the heavy air. Reporters waited, as always. Dr. Cole, Any comment on today's training launch? She paused. Justice begins where ego ends, she said simply. The quote spread before noon. By evening, her speech was trending again, not in outrage this time, but reverence. Across town, Thomas Halley watched the segment from his small apartment. The walls were bare. His police insignia sat boxed in the corner. He'd taken a security job at a warehouse, unarmed. Unremarkable, thought the reporter's voice played softly. Dr. Amara Cole continues her advocacy work, leading systemic reform efforts now adopted across 5 states. Halley turned off the TV and sat in silence. He picked up a letter, the same one she'd refused to accept months ago, unopened. He'd carried it everywhere since, not as penance, as reminder. He finally tore it open and read his own words. Dr. Cole, I don't expect forgiveness. I expect consequence. I saw you as defiance, not dignity. I was wrong. What I did to you was not procedure. It was prejudice disguised as duty. If justice exists, it should begin with me losing what I never deserved, authority without accountability. He folded the letter back and stared at it for a long time. Then he dropped it into the trash. Some debts couldn't be settled, only carried. Across the ocean, in Geneva, Amara stood at a symposium on global human rights. The audience was composed of ambassadors, activists, and journalists. Systemic reform, she said, is not a headline. It's a heartbeat week, irregular, but alive. Her words were recorded, translated, quoted worldwide. During the closing dinner, a delegate approached her. Dr. Cole, your case has become a symbol. She gave a faint smile. Symbols are dangerous, she said. People start worshipping them instead of continuing the work. That night, alone in her hotel room, she opened her old journal, the one from before the arrest. Between the pages, she found a folded photo, her at a conference in Nairobi, years ago, laughing without fear that she touched the image, then closed the book. The world had changed her, sharpened her voice, scarred her peace, but it hadn't broken her. A soft knock interrupted the quiet. It was Deshaun, holding 2 glasses of wine. You did it, he said. The UN just passed the resolution, mandatory anti-bias review for all international law enforcement liaisons. She blinked. It passed, unanimously. For the first time in months, she smiled fully. Then maybe it was worth it. Deshaun raised his glass. To poetic justice. She lifted hers. To persistence. They clinked glasses softly. The sound was small but final, a punctuation mark on a long, brutal sentence. Later, when the city outside had gone quiet, she stood by the balcony, watching the distant glow of streetlights over the lake. She whispered to the reflection on the glass, the version of herself that once trembled under flashing lights. You survived them. The reflection stared back, calm, unflinching. Behind her, the television played a final broadcast segment, a year after the wrongful arrest of Liberian diplomat Dr. Amara Cole. Major policy reforms have reshaped U.S. law enforcement training and international diplomatic protocol. What began as a night of humiliation has become a movement of accountability. The anchor paused. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it endures. Amara turned off the TV. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was earned. She sat down at her desk, opened her laptop, and began typing a new report. Title, Rebuilding Trust. Beyond the apology, the first line read, True reform begins not with outrage, but with memory. She saved the file, exhaled slowly, and closed the lid. Outside, dawn broke pale gold across the water. Poetic justice, she thought, wasn't about revenge or ruin. It was about endurance, the quiet insistence that truth would always resurface, no matter how many times it was buried. Washington, D.C., 1 year later, the city pulsed under a quiet sunrise, streets washed clean from overnight rain, the air crisp and unburdened. A convoy pulled up outside the Capitol. Cameras waited, but this time, they weren't hunting scandal. They were witnessing ceremony. Dr. Amara Cole stepped out, composed as ever. The press murmured her name, now with respect, not scandal. She had been invited to address Congress on the first anniversary of the Cole Act, a landmark bill mandating transparency and accountability for international arrests, involving diplomats and foreign nationals. Inside, the chamber was full. Politicians, activists, students, and survivors of similar injustices sat shoulder to shoulder. The speaker announced her name. Applause rose, restrained but meaningful. Amara stood at the podium. Her voice was steady, unembellished. 1 year ago, I was handcuffed for asserting my identity. Today, that same identity is written into law. Not as defiance, as proof, the silence was absolute. We speak often of progress as light breaking darkness, she continued. But real progress isn't illumination, it's correction. It's admitting the system's shadow was shaped by our own hands. A senator leaned forward, eyes fixed. A police commissioner took notes. I don't want to be remembered for what was done to me, Amara said. I want to be remembered for what was built after. Applause this time was sustained, rising through the hall like a tide-breaking stone. Afterward, in the private reception, Deshawn handed her a copy of the signed act. You should keep this, he said. She shook her head. Archive it. It belongs to everyone who didn't get their voice recorded. He nodded, understanding. Outside, she walked toward the reflecting pool, alone. The water mirrored the sky open, cloudless, infinite. Her phone buzzed. A message from the Geneva Commission. Appointment confirmed. Dr. Amara Cole, Chief Advisor for Global Accountability Standards. She read it twice, then powered off the phone. The moment didn't need witnesses. Nearby, a young girl approached, maybe 12, holding a notepad. Excuse me, Dr. Cole, I saw your speech on my school feed. My teacher said you changed laws. Amara smiled faintly. Your teacher gives me too much credit. But you made them listen, the girl said. That's power, right? No, Amara replied. That's responsibility. The girl nodded thoughtfully, scribbling the quote. Amara watched her walk away. She realized that was the legacy, not speeches, not policies. The spark in someone younger who believed justice could be engineered, not begged for. Later that evening, she visited the museum's new exhibit, Moments That Moved the Nation. Her arrest footage played on a muted screen beside historical protests and civil rights milestones, but the display didn't end there. It transitioned into images of new training academies, signed reforms, international dialogues. A plaque beneath read, Dr. Amara Cole, Catalyst for the Global Accountability Accord, 202 for 2025. She studied it for a long time. Her own face on the screen looked foreign, frightened, restrained, diminished. She whispered, you were necessary. A quiet reconciliation, not forgiveness, not pride. Integration. Outside, the sky deepened into amber and violet. Across the horizon, planes took off, their contrails slicing clean lines through open air. Amara stood there until night fully arrived at home. Her apartment was sparse, deliberate. Only essentials remained: research papers, a few photographs, a single framed quote above her desk that read, "Truth doesn't need defenders, it needs continuity." She sat, opening a blank page on her laptop, titled, "The Anatomy of Dignity, What Power Forgets." The cursor blinked patient, expectant. She began typing. Every system is a mirror. What it reflects is not the law, but the consciousness of those enforcing it. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Dr. Cole. The voice was older, subdued. "It's Thomas Halley." She said nothing. "I heard your speech," he continued. "I wanted to say, I'm still trying to learn what accountability means." "Then keep trying," she said. "That's all it ever means." Silence, then a quiet, "Thank you." She ended the call, not from anger, from closure. Later, she stepped onto her balcony. The city below glowed with restrained peace, not utopia, but repair. She breathed in, slow and deliberate. For the first time since that night, the flashing lights, the cuffs, the headlines, she felt weightless. Justice, she understood now, was in triumph. It was equilibrium restored. Her reflection in the glass didn't tremble anymore. It met her eyes. Calm, resolute, complete. The wind rose slightly, lifting the edges of the papers on her desk. One sheet fluttered free, landing on the balcony rail. Her handwritten note from months ago. Survival is not the goal. Continuity is. She let it go. The paper drifted into the dark, carried upward by the current. Above her, the stars appeared through the thinning clouds, each one a small defiance against the void. Amara turned back inside, closed her laptop, and stood by the window one last time. Tomorrow would bring more debates, more resistance, more unfinished work. But tonight, the sky was clear, and for the first time in years, so was she.